Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to those of you who are here in person. Thanks to everybody joining on the live stream, and thanks to all of you who will watch video of this event later. I'm Michael Strain, the Director of Economic Policy Studies here at the American Enterprise Institute, and I'm honored to welcome Maroš Šefčovič, European Commissioner for Trade and Economic Security, for a conversation about economic security, trade policy, and EU-US cooperation. Among his many responsibilities, the Commissioner is responsible for continuing Europe's leadership roles in rules-based trade, managing and deepening the EU's trade partnerships around the world, including with the United States, and leading the European Commission's work on the strategic use of economic strategy tools, including standards for supply chains and security around foreign direct investment and outbound investments. This event is taking place at a time of deep angst for those of us who value the economic and security relationship between the United States and Europe. President Biden's industrial subsidies were a source of concern for our European allies. And as he did during his first term in office, President Trump is threatening our allies, including Europe, with tariffs. Moreover, at the time of this writing, President Trump and senior members of his administration have actively sought to distance the United States from European allies with respect to the war in Ukraine, the threat to Europe posed by Russia, and the rise of extremist political parties in some European nations. This context makes conversations like the one we are having today all the more important. Those of us who understand the importance of the relationship between the US and Europe, the importance for peace and the importance for prosperity, need to work to shore up and strengthen that relationship. Promoting free trade is an important component of strengthening that relationship, which is why I am so pleased and honored again to welcome the Commissioner here today. The run of show for this event is straightforward. After my remarks, the Commissioner will deliver his speech, followed by a conversation between him and my colleague, Stan Veuger, which in turn will be followed by questions from the audience. Dr. Stan Veuger is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He is also an affiliate of Harvard's Center for American Political Studies and a fellow at the IE School of Politics, Economics, and Global Affairs, in addition to being a visiting lecturer in economics at Harvard. Maroš Šefčovič is European Commissioner for Trade and Economic Security, Interinstitutional Relations, and Transparency. He has previously held other senior positions at the European Commission. From 2004 to 2009, he was the permanent representative of Slovakia to the EU, and from 1999 to 2002, he was the ambassador of Slovakia to Israel. Please join me in welcoming the Commissioner to the podium.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, and I really appreciate your warm welcome. And also, I really would like to thank the American Enterprise Institute for hosting this event. I have to say that it has been almost exactly a year since I last visited Washington, D.C. In fact, I realized that I have been here every February since 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and each time marking a significant moment in our relationship. And on top of it, usually I was coming just for the weekend of Super Bowl, but I know that now I am 1 week late. And I have to say that this year is no different, as I'm here to address the critical issue, the US administration's proposal to impose tariffs on EU exports. This has sparked the concerns about the state of our transatlantic partnership, prompting some to wonder whether it is temporarily under the weather. Last year, I quoted the American industrial pioneer Henry Ford, who said, I'm quoting, "Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is a success." End of quote. And I think that these words resonate even more strongly today. The European Union is built on free trade among its members, and our commitment to opening up the world trade is deeply embedded in our DNA. And it should therefore come as no surprise that the EU is the world's largest trading bloc. We have free trade agreements with 76 countries, and are the leading trading partner for 72 nations, accounting for 38% of the global GDP. So we know a thing or two about trade. The EU is also the United States' most important trading partner. Over the past decade, the EU-US bilateral trade in goods and services has doubled, surpassing $1.7 trillion in 2023. Put simply, the EU-US economic relationship is the largest in the world. Together, we represent nearly 30% of global trade, with daily exchanges worth over $4.5 billion. And this unique bond benefits both sides of the Atlantic. It is the very definition of a win-win partnership, and there is nothing unfair about it. Let me give you a few concrete examples. Boeing and Airbus build civil aircraft in the US with the cutting-edge electronics, power systems, and fuselages from European companies. The US battle tanks and armored fighting vehicles rely on EU technology such as drivetrains and cannons. The US semiconductor production depends on the EU-made lithography machines. Even the US Mint uses EU-made high-tech printing machines to print US dollars and prevent counterfeiting. The EU is a massive market for Americans' products as well. For example, 50% of our LNG imports come from the US. And in return, Europe is your largest LNG export market, accounting for over 60% of US LNG exports, double the US flows to Asia. In 2019, I had the privilege of joining President Trump at the opening of an LNG export terminal in Hackberry, Louisiana. I also worked closely with US LNG producers to spearhead our pioneering joint gas purchases for the whole EU, designed to replace Russian gas supplies. And it is true that the EU enjoys a relatively small trade surplus, but let me again put it into the perspective. The surplus represents only 3% of our bilateral trade, $50 billion out of $1.7 trillion. And this is a small fraction, I would say a drop in the ocean, if you will, of our overall economic exchanges. The US enjoys a large trade surplus in services, from financial services to streaming platforms and social media. Even a Tesla car is full of services. The EU imports twice as many digital services from the US as all of the Asia-Pacific region. Thus, the deficits in goods and services nearly balance out. And this reflects the natural structure of our economies driven by the preferences of European and American consumers. It is simply a market-driven allocation of resources, and this is what well-functioning international trade is all about, benefiting both parties. Neither side is losing out, we are both gaining. When it comes to investment, the numbers are just as impressive. EU foreign direct investment in the US totals $2.8 trillion, a figure 10 times greater than EU investment in India and China combined, 10 times. European companies are the largest foreign investor in the US, contributing capital, jobs, and technology. They employ 3.5 million people on American soil and pay taxes into the US budget. So while the late Madeleine Albright called the US indispensable nation, one could argue that given our mutual interdependence, the EU and US share an indispensable partnership. Now let me address the pressing issue, tariffs. I'm reminded of the words of President Ronald Reagan, who said, "We are in the same boat with our trading partners. If one partner shoots a hole in the boat, does it make sense for the other one to shoot another hole in the boat? We should be working together to plug them up." He advocated for free markets and fair trade, emphasizing the importance for both economic prosperity and political stability. We often hear claims that the EU imposes higher tariffs on imports than the US. But the data tells a different story. The EU is one of the most open economies in the world, with over 70% of imports entering at zero tariff. With regards to EU-US trade relations, the overall picture is very balanced, providing a robust level playing field for businesses on both sides of the pond. The average EU duty on US goods is 0.9%, whereas EU exports to the US face an average tariff of 1.5%. For certain products, the level of duties varies, but tariff peaks exist on both sides. For example, the EU has a peak tariff on cars, while the US has a peak on trucks. In some sectors, US tariffs are higher. For example, US agri-food products face a 3.5 tariff when entering the EU, while EU agricultural products are subject to 5.7% tariff in the US. So given these facts, the EU sees no justification for sudden unilateral tariff increases by the US. Our businesses rely on economic stability, predictability, and certainty on both sides of the Atlantic. If the US imposes tariffs on EU products, it would create unnecessary barriers to European exports, harming businesses and workers on both sides. Therefore, to protect European interests, we will have no choice but to respond firmly and swiftly. But we do hope to avoid this scenario, meaning the unnecessary pain of measures and countermeasures, and remain committed to constructive dialogue. That is why I'm here this week. One more paraphrasing of Ronald Reagan. Commerce is not a warfare. It is an economic alliance benefiting both countries, and the peaceful trading partners are allies, not enemies. So the EU remains convinced that the free and fair trade is worth fighting for. And in this context, we'll continue to shape our own destiny. With a clear plan and clear sense of urgency, the EU is focused on unleashing the potential of our economy. First, competitiveness is front and center in these efforts. We plan to increase the production within the EU, and this goes both for energy-intensive industries and clean tech sectors. There are no electric cars without steel and without batteries, while there are no batteries without chemicals or processed critical minerals. It's as simple as that. Second, the trade remains at the core of our alliances. We are actively expanding our network of trade agreements, most recently updating our relationship with Switzerland, finalizing EU-Mercosur partnership, modernizing EU-Mexico trade agreement, and relaunching negotiations with Malaysia. We are also pursuing negotiations with India, Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines, while exploring opportunities with the Gulf countries. Overall, we see clear momentum. In uncertain times, many countries seek continuity, stability, and predictability in their trade partners, and they turn to us. Third, our openness does not mean we will not protect our interest and our European market when necessary. Make no mistake, as we expand our trade network, we also invest considerable thought, time, and effort into strengthening our trade defense instruments and enhancing our toolbox for economic security. For instance, we have the anti-coercion instrument to protect the EU from economic coercion by third countries. The range of countermeasures is broad and can be deployed swiftly, including import and export restrictions, limitations on access to the EU market, and more. We are also revising our foreign direct investment screening regulation to help us address risks to the EU security and public order. We are taking steps to prevent EU outbound investments, such as in semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and quantum technologies, from negatively impacting the economic security of the European Union by ensuring that key technologies and expertise do not fall in the wrong hands. With all these steps, we are sending a clear signal to our industries and to our allies that the EU is an excellent place to do business, and we want the businesses to thrive. And by the way, the signal is not only for EU businesses. Europe is open for American trade and investment, and we believe that we have a very attractive offering to help your fantastic companies expand, creating American jobs and American wealth. I will be making this point to my American counterparts when I meet them later today. The EU is interested in making deals that foster fairness, burden sharing, and mutual benefits. And to conclude, it's worth reiterating that the transatlantic bond is the most natural for us. I firmly believe that it makes sense for both the EU and the US to work together to strengthen this relationship and expand into new areas. So let's continue to make our trade and investment relationship one of a kind, truly unique on the global stage, great. As you say here in America, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those comments, Commissioner. I was wondering, as you think about how to respond to potential tariffs the U.S. wants to impose, of course, trade policy in the European Union is set at the union-wide level. But there's a number of other issues that are either trade adjacent, you may think of tax policy, or that are not trade related at all, but that the U.S. administration wants to link to trade policy, like the security arrangements in Europe. How do you coordinate response between the Union and the member states on trade policy now that it's gotten tied into these various other aspects of the transatlantic relationship?
Thank you very much for that question. As you know, we have quite an experience in European Union in Brussels how to coordinate, because we are doing it every day with our 27 member states, and clearly the EU-US relationship has such a strategic nature that, of course, not only it's a massive trade relationship, but of course it goes in all, I would say, the other areas. But what we are offering to our American partners is, I would say, this one-stop shop. We are ready to be this link. We are ready to be the facilitator. Of course, if it comes to trade, this is the exclusive competence of the European Union and the Commission. And I am working practically on a daily basis with all the trade ministers, and we communicate with our member states on all levels, from ambassadors to the experts. We have now regular debates on the level of the heads of states and government, who are meeting now almost every month, because we are living such a dramatic times. And everybody understands that we have to do much more for defense. I mean, that's very clear, especially, you know, we are now the only major economy which has two wars so close to our borders. And you remember what has happened in Middle East and the consequences we had to face with the massive migration from the Middle East. So it's very clear that the defense cooperation and much bigger investment into the defense sectors is again something which is primarily in the competence of the member states. But we are looking for the way how to create new financing opportunities, how to use our financial institutions, how to create, I would say, the budgetary space for our member states to invest more in the space. So we are ready to discuss with our American friends and partners the cooperation on the different level. I know that President Trump is a big deal maker, and there would be an idea to have kind of impressive grand bargain package. So let's discuss all these things, including, I would say, these issues, because I am, you know, true believer in transatlantic relationship. If you allow me one personal anecdote. I was growing up behind the Iron Curtain, literally 2 kilometers behind the barbed wire in Bratislava. So there was a Danube River. So I saw that the people are living on the other side of the river, that there are houses, there are lights, there are cars. But until I was 23, I didn't believe that I would be ever allowed to cross the river. And then what happened, we had this huge democratization going on through Central and Eastern Europe. And I got the invitations to go to Stanford University by Hoover Institution. So the first Western countries I ever visited was actually California. So I made it from Iron Curtain to California in a very short period of time. I will never forget it. And since that moment, I'm a true believer that, together we won the Cold War. I mean, together we achieved such enormous achievements for the liberalization, democratization. We built this most impressive, massive trade relationship, and therefore I'm personally committed, to do maximum to avoid the problems, focus on the positives, and look for the solutions which will be, of course, appealing and good for our American partners.
So there's a number of concerns that the U.S. I think has around European policies that are, not quite trade policy, but close enough. In particular, related to the large American tech companies. So the U.S. I think has long been annoyed by the digital service taxes that exist in some European countries, and that the Commission has in the past pushed for at the Europe-wide level. And there's discontent around the Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act. Are those areas that you are thinking about drawing into the negotiation process as well?
We are ready to of course, have a dialogue on this and to talk about the big tech. Just again, to put it a little bit into the perspective. When I was looking about, I would say, the big tech companies from US, most of them have more clients in Europe than in US. And if you look at the revenue, so it's between 30 to 50% of the revenue is generated in the European Union. And these rules, which you just highlighted, they really do not have a discriminatory nature. They are not aimed at the US big tech, because if you are talking about, these rules, first one is clearly aimed to make sure that we would protect the small guys from the big guys, that we will not allow them, I would say, super dominance on the market, which would suppress the innovation and which would make the small companies simply not competitive. And I think that this was very clearly also the position which I felt was presented by the American Vice President Vance when he was at the AI Summit in Paris. And I would say the second rule is clearly aimed at protecting our minors, protecting the free speech. So if you see that there is, the child pornography spreads through the platform, and you are getting into the discussion with the platform to do something about it, you do not have the response. So then I think that we have the moral and legal obligations to take action. And the last point I would mention, because this was about the digital service tax, there I think it's also very important to remind that we've been working very closely with the United States on the OECD-driven business, because we wanted to have a global solution to this problem. More or less to respect the rule that the taxes should be paid on the territory where the revenue and profit is generated. And there, I think that we had very...
That's not how we do it in other industries, though, right? We normally...
I mean, what we wanted to avoid was to simply create some possibility for the new modern tax havens or some kind of so-called tax optimization, where especially the big companies can simply avoid to pay any taxes. That was the motivation behind that. But we understand that this is something what the US administration wants to discuss, to get the more details, and of course we're prepared for the dialogue.
So now imagine, let's hope everything works out this week, and then we have a free, and then we sign a EU-US free trade agreement next week. But imagine that doesn't happen. Right, you're going to retaliate. How do you think about that retaliation? Of course, many economists will say, the retaliation also involves harms to your own consumers, to your own businesses. Last time, the EU pretty specifically targeted exporters in Wisconsin and Kentucky because they were seen as being represented by influential politicians in the U.S. In that similar vein, have you thought about targeting, say, specific senior advisors of the U.S. president and their companies?
No, we are not. Honestly, we are not there yet, because I'm really honored, privileged, and I will present my thanks to the Secretary of Commerce, Mr. Latnik, I think in 1 hour time, that I'm actually his first official guest, because I think he was confirmed yesterday evening. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure, we had the first video call last week, that I wanted to be here immediately when it's possible. The first day when it's possible is today. I'm here, and I'm here because I want to avoid this lose-lose scenario. I want to avoid this unnecessary pain, and we are ready to get into these, I would say, positive negotiations. And I hope we'll get there. I mean, to do my job, you have to be eternal optimist. I am, because sometimes really things looked very, very difficult. I was also, and I'm still responsible for the post-Brexit negotiations. So I know that sometimes it's very difficult before it gets better, but usually it gets better if you have two committed partners, and I believe that this would be the case also for both of us. And but of course, if we will not be able to solve this situation, and if really we will be kind of hit hard arbitrarily without proper justification, so that's only natural that such a big trading bloc like us would react. We don't like it. I know that our businesses don't like it, so there is a pain on the both sides. So we'll do our utmost to avoid it, but if we cannot avoid it, we'll have to act in that regard.
In your opening comments, you mentioned you talked a bit about the sort of broader web of trade relations that the EU has, and how it's still making progress on deepening and liberalizing those trade relations. Obviously, those trade relations are all organized, basically around international trade law, as conventionally understood until recently. The U.S. now, for a decade or so, has really moved away from abiding by international trade law, except for in the most flimsy protectual way. How do you see that? Do you see the EU and all of its trading partners, maybe including China, as continuing to operate sort of under WTO rules, and then the US is just sort of outside the system, and we deal with it on a case-by-case basis? Or is that not a good description of how you see
I think it's a little bit more complex than that, because if you look at WTO, I think that also US until today actually benefits from the law which was laid down and developed over many years. We have a dispute settlement mechanism which is not working because the so-called appellate judge has been not renominated. But otherwise, the system for the global trading is based on this network of the agreements and the rules which have been built and constructed over the years. Of course, if the US would be fully involved, fully back, it would have completely different dimension. But we feel from discussion with our partner that first and foremost, the WTO is a very important organization, but of course it needs reforms as well. It has to adjust, it has to adapt to the 21st century. I mean, when WTO became as a I would say successor to the GATT agreements, we didn't have internet at the time. We didn't have the digital services. We didn't have, I would say, many of the products even existing at that stage. So clearly, this has to be fixed. This has to be I would say modernized. And then also I would say the global trade went to such a dimension that from one side we have this hyper competition, from other side we have, I would say, these global connections and global value chains which need totally different approach. And then I think what needs to be also very clearly addressed that if the WTO mechanism is abused by non-market economies, so we also have to act. And for this, I think it would be much better, much stronger if we can do it together with the United States of America.
One final question before I turn it over to our audience. Next year, the carbon border adjustment is supposed to kick in. How do you think the U.S. is going to respond to that?
I think, that's again something what we have to discuss. I mean, first and foremost, I think what is very important is that we knew that this is something which would raise a lot of questions, and we had only one motivation. We wanted first and foremost to respect the Paris Agreement, tackle climate change, and also to prevent so-called carbon leakage, because we've been imposing very high environmental standards for our companies, and then we've been getting the products from abroad where the standards been not respected, and the difference in carbon footprint, for example, for the steel, sometimes was 2 or 3 times higher than when produced in the EU. What is, I think, very important for the American audience to know is that this, I think, 6 targeted commodities, US is doing extremely well because you have actually very small carbon footprint. In many of them, you're actually cleaner than the European products. And then also listening to the worries and criticism from the third partners, I think more than 80% of the companies would be exempted from the CBAM because we just really want to focus it on really the big companies, big traders who can do it. But for SMEs and from medium-sized companies, they simply shouldn't be falling under the CBAM. And I believe that this actually would help to those companies which wants to be sustainable, cleaner, which wants to operate with a lower carbon footprint. But I can imagine that the debates on the detail would be quite demanding. So we have now the team, dedicated team from the EU, which is traveling literally across the globe and which is talking to the countries which might be the most effective, just to explain it, look for the solutions, and do it in a way that we understand each other and we are kind of minimizing the negative impact for the responsible businesses.
Very good. Let's take a couple of questions from the audience. Raise your hand if you have a question. If I point at you, then please wait for the mic to arrive and then state your name, ask your question. Let's go all the way in the back, on the left arm. I can barely see. Well, wait, 1 to 2 of you both go.
Hi, I'm Ari from Politico. Thank you very much for doing this. I wanted to see, Trump yesterday said that the EU had lowered its 10% duty on imports on vehicles to 2.5%. I guess I'm curious about a reaction on that. And would that be something that you folks are considering or actively talking about? Thank you very much.
You want?
Yeah, let's do the other question as well. Yeah, sorry.
Hi, my name is Gregor Schwung. I'm from the German newspaper Die Welt. I would like to ask, how do you go and do these negotiations with an administration who has a different view on facts? When we talk about the VAT, for example, you made clear in a long document what it is. Clearly, they don't understand it. So what's your approach to something like that?
Thank you very much. So you see, we need good journalists to ask good questions because they're usually first one to break dice. On the first question, you would recall that I think it was the announcement by President Trump, I think last week, that he would like to go down the path of reciprocal tariffs, and I was reacting to this very clearly. So if we are going to talking about lowering the tariffs, even eliminating the tariffs, let's say for industrial products, this would be something which we are ready to discuss. We are ready to go for it. We are ready to discuss, including we are ready to look at the tariffs for the cars, because also the example I used in my introductory remarks. For US, this peak import duty is for pickup trucks and vans, if I recall, it's 25%, and for personal vehicles from Europe, it's 10%. So let's look at it. But we would like, and that would be also my plea this afternoon, to discuss with my American partners. That what are the topics our American partners would like to discuss? What are the issues? So we can have we can start the process. We can discuss it item by item and look for the common solution in some, I would say, solid package. So that would be, I would say, my request and my plea with my counterparts. And if it comes to the second question, look, we have 2 very massive economies, and when I was looking at our Eurostat figures, so this is the European Statistics Office, and American Statistics Office, you might have a situation that you have slightly different figures. There might be different methodology, there might be a different approach, but again, it's up to us, and it's I would say responsibility of our experts to figure out what is the baseline, what are the figures we can agree upon, because once you know the problem, once you're able to measure it, then you know how to address it. And this is, I would say, the method which we will be also proposing in this particular case, including explaining how the VAT works, that I would say that we can really compare it to the sales tax here. It's paid by the consumers. It's never paid by the businesses, because businesses are getting reimbursed. And I think we are not alone who is using it, because I think it's more than 150 countries on this planet which have the same system. So we hope that we'll be able to explain this, to discuss it, and I believe in good faith negotiations, and that would be clearly our goal.
Have you suggested to the US that maybe we too should adopt a value-added tax?
I am brave and courageous man, but I would like to start from the, let's say, lower ambition.
Fair enough. Let's do a question over here, if we have any. Yes. Go ahead. Please wait for the mic. Sorry.
Hi, Barbara Noordermeer of the Dutch Financial Daily. Thank you so much for your time. I was wondering what result of your visit this week will have you travel back to Europe, relieved, confident, excited maybe even, back to Europe, and how far or how close to that are you?
That's a very good question, but I think I'll be able to tell you tomorrow. I think we planned the press conference, I think tomorrow morning. I'm looking at 9, I think. So then I will be able to share the impression from the meetings which we have, I would say, the whole afternoon today. So that would be the time to ask this question. I will do my best to give you the answer. But of course, there is enormous interest in this visit, in our discussion, because I mean, I would say that our trade relationship is so big that if one of us sneezes, the rest of the trading world might get pneumonia. So I think we have to be very, very responsible how we deal with each other and how we deal with this artery of the global trade. I mean, it's more than 30% of trading is done just between two of us, and I know that almost straight from the plane when I will be back in Europe, we go to meet our member states and discuss further steps, because this is really like one of the top priorities: how to deal with these issues, how to deal it constructively. The US is our closest ally. We have a lot of things on the global agenda to deal with, and we definitely want to have a good and constructive partnership and relationship with US.
I think we have time for one more question before I need to let you go so you can go to the White House. Unless someone immediately raises his arm. Oh, there we go. You're getting his question, not mine. Yeah.
Hello, Henry from AEI. A question about the upcoming German elections. So that's obviously next Sunday. With Germany being like Europe's largest economy, do you see there being any large consequence, a big directional change on part of the EU?
I think that if you look at the well-established parties, of course, I'm following also personally very, very closely. I mean, we are working on many projects in very tight way with Germany, with the German government. Of course, the Christian Democrats are extremely well represented in the European Parliament. They are the leading forces. So I think that I have a solid understanding about the key parties in Germany. So I'm absolutely convinced that the next coalition government, because this is what is the most probable result, will be absolutely pro-European, would be very strong on defense, would be very strong on reforms in European Union, would be very pushy or on lowering administrative burden, will be very tough on cutting red tape, and would have very clear expectations how to handle better the issues linked with migration, and how to make sure that European Union as such is acting much faster, is more agile, and simply corresponds to these very, very dynamic times we are living in. Of course, as you see, everywhere the political situations is quite polarized. It's my personal observation. Sometimes I have a feeling that we still didn't manage to adapt the traditional, say, democratic instruments to this fast-paced politics generated by the social media. But I'm sure we'll learn it. We find a way how to do that, and it would be in the end for the benefit of the democratic functioning.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, with that, Commissioner, thank you so much for coming to AEI. Welcome back anytime. Good luck.
You.
Good luck later today.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.